Life has never been about following rigid rules or being bound by conventions that don't make sense to me. And of course, the love of freedom has a unique way of shaping the relationships we cultivate, the moments we choose to live intensely. I've always been like this, and probably always will be. My name is Claire, I'm 62 years old, and today I'm going to tell you my story. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and stay until the end so you don't miss a single detail of what I'm going to tell you. And that's how, over time, I ended up falling in love with a man who, at first glance, seemed to be the opposite of everything I was. But with him, I found a refuge. I found stability in a peaceful connection, something that deep down I had always longed for, without even realizing it. James, my husband, was my anchor. He gave me the balance I didn't know I needed. Together, we had already experienced a lot, but he always had a special passion, racing. And because of that, I also started to frequent these places, these events. Because, with him by my side, my world turned more slowly, with less haste and more passion for life. On weekends, I would often accompany him to competitions, feeling the sound of the engines reverberate in my gut. There, among the cars and the speed, I would watch attentively, always applauding everyone's efforts, but with a special eye for the youngest driver on the track, Jake, my husband's son. Jake was always a constant presence at the events, and from the beginning, I felt attracted to him in a way that I tried, in vain, to hide. He was always by our side, with his youthful energy and a smile that seemed to radiate in a different way. I knew he had a dream, and I knew that this dream was, in a way, fueled by his father's support, and by me, of course. But the intensity with which he spoke about racing, the way his eyes would shine when he referred to his future on the track, made me admire this young man more and more. He was brave, determined. And with that, a man was slowly taking shape there, before me, stronger and more determined to follow his destiny. I always supported him, encouraging him, rooting for him as if he were a son, but there was something in my chest that I couldn't control. Something that grew stronger and stronger. I knew I shouldn't feed this feeling, that he was much younger than me, and that he was my husband's son, but, in those moments, with him there, by my side, talking about his achievements and frustrations, I felt my world turn upside down. Of course, I didn't say any of this. Never. After all, I had my husband, and he knew that I loved him deeply. But it was impossible to deny that there was something about Jake that moved me, something that made me question how far my own freedom could go. I tried to fool myself, telling myself that it was just admiration, that it was all nothing more than a simple connection of souls that, by chance, met at some point in life. But deep down, something inside me knew there was more. Something that made me feel Jake's closeness in a way I had never felt before, a touch of attention that I felt, even if it was not verbalized. It was a fine line between what I knew I should feel and what, deep down, my heart was beginning to question. James had stayed home to rest, tired from a long and hectic week, and Jake, with the youthful enthusiasm that always accompanied him, suggested that I accompany him to the track where the race would be held the next day. He had talked about the preparation for the big event, about what could happen, about the cars, about the adrenaline. I had already been familiar with that environment, but always from afar, as an observer. The idea of being closer, of seeing behind the scenes, seemed like an adventure that I was willing to experience. We got there, and although the track was practically empty, I could feel the vibe of the place, as if the energy of the cars and the drivers was still in the air. Jake was excited, explaining how everything worked, pointing out details and talking so enthusiastically about the speed that I could barely keep up. But what really made my stomach flutter was not just the sound of the engines in the distance, nor the grandeur of the place. It was the look in his eyes, the way he looked at me, as if he were inviting me into a world that I had perhaps never imagined wanting to explore. You know, he said suddenly, with a mischievous smile on his face, I've always wanted to take someone for a spin around the track at night. Just you and me. It feels different this way, without all those cars and people. He looked at me, waiting for an answer, but I was silent for a moment, considering the proposal. I knew there was something risky about it, something that could be impulsive. Jake was young, and I was, let's say, more experienced, but still, something deep inside me told me that accepting that invitation was exactly what I needed, something that would make me feel alive again, outside the patterns that life usually imposed. I don't know, Jake. I answered, trying to keep a firm posture, but the idea of a walk with him, without anyone else around, seduced me in a way that I couldn't deny. He approached, a persuasive look in his eyes, as if he knew that I was being led by something greater than myself. Come on, Claire. It's nothing big. Just a walk. I promise it will be safe, and believe me, I'm good at what I do. He smiled with that natural charm he had, and I knew at that moment that it would be hard to resist. Something in me surrendered, not only to the invitation, but to the confidence he transmitted. It was as if he knew exactly what I wanted, and what I needed to hear. Okay, I said finally, feeling a shiver run down my spine as I made my decision. I'll go with you. Jake smiled broadly, his eyes shining with the excitement of someone who knew he had just achieved what he wanted. He led me to the car, a sports car that seemed to have been made for this moment, fast, audacious, a machine of power and control. He opened the door for me with a gentle gesture, and I got in, feeling the warm leather of the seat against my skin, the adrenaline rising in my body. He got into the car on the other side, and in one swift movement, started the engine. The sound of the engine was like a call, a promise of something to come. The track was deserted, with only the soft light of the spotlights illuminating the marks on the asphalt. There was no one else, just the two of us, in that silent vastness. Jake accelerated slowly, the sound of the car increasing as he gained confidence on the track. I felt my heart beat faster, but not from fear. It was an unfamiliar excitement, a feeling of freedom that I had not experienced in a long time. The wind whipped against my face as the car slid down the track, and I found myself laughing, feeling the pleasure of that speed, of that unique connection with Jake. With each lap, I felt something stronger rise, a mix of adrenaline and something else, something I could no longer ignore. When he braked smoothly, stopping the car next to the finish line, I looked at him, and the energy between us felt palpable. It wasn't about the car or the race anymore. It was about what had formed between us, a silent complicity, an understanding that needed no words. The car was stopped, but the energy that still hung in the air was palpable. The sound of the engine, now silent, seemed to still echo inside me, and my breathing was still a little faster. Jake didn't take his eyes off me, his gaze intense, as if he was waiting for something, as if it was more than just a simple lap around the track. He turned slightly, the seat still warm around us, and with a mischievous smile, he asked, "Do you like speed, Claire?" His voice was low, full of a slight tease, as if he knew the answer was deeper inside me than I was willing to admit. His eyes were fixed on mine, and I could feel the tension building. The wind still made my loose hair dance around my face, and there was something in this moment, in this silence, that seemed to carry more meaning than I wanted to acknowledge. "I like your speed," I said, almost whispering, the tone of my voice softer than usual, but still firm. The answer was there, clear and direct, as if I were letting out something that had been kept hidden until then. Jake was silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on me with a gleam that I couldn't tell if it was of satisfaction or surprise. But the way he smiled, with a touch of confidence, told me that he was completely aware of what I was trying to say. The engine roared, and a burst of power seemed to make the air around it tremble. And I could feel the tension, the energy flowing through every inch of it. He looked at me, a mischievous smile on his face, and, without a word, he stepped on the accelerator. The acceleration was instantaneous, and the impact was like a wave of electricity that ran through my body. The wind hit my face hard, my hair lifting, but I didn't care. I felt it pulsing beneath me, as if it were an extension of both of us, carrying us towards something unknown, something irresistible. The track lights flashed past in quick succession, a blur of color and shadow as Jake controlled the car with a skill that took my breath away. I found myself holding onto the seat with one hand, the other gripping the safety bar, but what surprised me most was how completely involved I was. Every turn, every acceleration, every spin of the wheel seemed to mesmerize me. My body reacted to every movement, every quickened breath. The adrenaline was consuming me, and the excitement, this feeling of being alive, of being in Jake's hands and of speed, was too pleasurable. The fear seemed to have disappeared, replaced by something I could no longer deny, an intense excitement, a mixture of desire and adrenaline that merged, burning inside me. I looked at Jake, who had a smile on his face, but his eyes were focused on the track, determined, controlling every movement with precision. He seemed even more powerful there, in control of the car, and something inside me lit up. Without thinking, I shouted, my voice almost lost in the wind, but he certainly heard, "Jake, don't stop. Keep going. Don't stop." I didn't know exactly where those words came from, but it was as if the car was taking me to a place where I could no longer control my own desires. I wanted more. I wanted to feel the speed again, and this time, I didn't want anything to stop me. Jake glanced at me quickly, a dangerous glint in his eyes, and then, with a slight smile, he pressed the accelerator harder. The sound of the engine intensified, and with a click of the gear shift, it plunged into the next corner with even more intensity. The sensation of being thrown forward, of being pushed to the limit, made me forget everything around me. It was just me, the car, and the speed. Nothing else mattered. I leaned back a little from the seat, my breath coming in short pants, and a laugh escaped my lips, a mixture of surprise and pleasure. The car responded, following my energy, and somehow it seemed like the moment would never end. I wanted to keep going, not just on the track, but in that feeling, in that heat, in that urgency that was growing inside me. "You're amazing," I said, almost without a voice, allowing myself to be honest, more than ever. Jake smiled, his eyes fixed on the track, but I knew he felt the same way. I knew, because that moment, there, with the speed surrounding us, with the car accelerating even more, was something we couldn't deny. Something that went far beyond the race, something that was silently growing between us. Thank you for listening to me. Did you like these infidelity stories? Drop a comment below if you want part 2. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more cheating wife stories.